Hello, Baker Econ students. We are in our final week, so these courses go so quickly. So just finish out the week strong. This week we're just going to look at 2 more chapters. So you're going to have your forum discussion again, homework, and wrap up the final quiz. And do make sure to wrap up everything up by Sunday at midnight because no assignments will be accepted after that time period. So a little bit of overview this week. You're going to look at both fiscal policy and monetary policy to wrap up the last week. We've touched on these before. You're just going to get into a little bit more detail now from a macroeconomic perspective. But starting off with just fiscal policy, the textbook's going to talk about the budget, how the process works and how it's submitted, and starting a new fiscal budget at the start of October. There's going to be some terminology such as like transfer payments. To me, transfer payments are some of the best things because that means that you're getting money without having to do anything. So this is Medicaid, Medicare. You also say Social Security. Again, the idea is that we measure these things. We're not actually producing any goods and services, so that goes back to GDP, but it is income for individuals. So, and these things have to be paid for. You think about like from the national, federal level, there's a lot of money that is spent on various things. It could be defense, education, highways, whatever it is. People have to make choices, and that's often where the political debate comes into about how we should be spending money. And occasionally we'll hear about government shutdowns, so hopefully that does not happen in the near future anytime too soon because that definitely scares markets if it's prolonged. But with this, it's the idea that, yes, we've run budget deficits. There's been a few years, maybe in the 90s, that we had surpluses. But it's that idea of like I take in so much in revenues from taxes. If I'm spending more, I have a shortfall. In order to meet that shortfall, I have to issue some type of debt, and that debt is in the form of treasury bills, notes, and bonds. And just know that we are always going to have this market. It's good and important to have this market too because the financial markets depend on the quick liquidity and a safe place to park the money. So there will always be treasury bills, notes, and bonds, and financial markets would want those things too. When you're looking at fiscal policy, you're going to read a little bit about automatic stabilizers. Automatic stabilizers are a good thing that we have in place now. This wasn't always part of our history, but our tax policy is even an automatic stabilizer in the sense that if you make less money, you have more percentage of disposable income to earn, or what you've earned, you get to keep more. But as we have a progressive tax system, as the more you make, the higher percentage of taxes that you will pay. There's discretionary spending. And the idea that I can determine, taxes and government spending. But ultimately, I'm trying to reach a goal of reaching for a full level of GDP or potential GDP is what I want to approach. There's one thing towards the end of the chapter I want you to think about that's called crowding out. The idea is that we've kind of looked in these chapters, and what you're going to read about is a lot of this, that expansionary fiscal policy is going to shift that aggregate demand curve out. It goes through the multiplier process, either through direct spending or tax multiplier, so you're going to read a lot about that in the chapter. But if you think about that aggregate expenditures equation, we go back to C plus I plus G plus net exports, that if I am a business and the government is spending money to try to stimulate the economy, and I'm trying to raise money through issuing corporate bonds, but the treasury bills or notes and bonds are paying a better rate than what I can pay, and it's safe because they can guarantee the money where Ford cannot guarantee money on the bonds they issue. What you have is that although the government's trying to stimulate the economy, they've crowded out the private sector side, and more people are purchasing government investments, and Ford doesn't have as much money. And just using Ford as an example, to go out and invest in things that they need. So it actually kind of crowds out or shifts back that aggregate demand curve to a degree. And if you had full crowding out, it's kind of saying the government's attempts to try to increase aggregate demand is just exactly offset by the decrease on the investment side from the private sector. All right, last thing, we talked about the Federal Reserve already, but we're going to talk a little more detail about kind of objectives and policy. You're going to read about monetary policy, mandates, like the idea of a stable prices, maximum employment. They'll target a little bit more discussion on the Fed funds rate. And there's a really good example on page 859. If you go through that, it kind of goes through the process, kind of explain their objectives. But the Fed may, just like through fiscal policy, monetary policy too, they may be trying to fight a recession, or they're trying to pump up the money supply, or they might be trying to fight inflation, where they're trying to decrease the money supply. decrease consumer spending. That way the economy doesn't overheat and causes high inflation. So last, just to wrap up, they're going to talk a little bit about what we call like rule-based decision making. Well, that's like they're going to talk about the Taylor rules, kind of something maybe just easy to work with, set and understand, predictable. Or you kind of also look at discretionary based. And this is why I say the Fed acts more on is just gathering a lot of economic data to help them make decisions about what they should be doing with interest rates or trying to target a certain policy, whether it's inflation or employment. So, well, that's it for the week. I'm going to say that I've enjoyed working with you all this past 6 weeks. It's gone quickly, but hopefully you have a little bit of better appreciation of economics. We had some good topics to talk about during the past 6 weeks through your forum discussions, so I've really enjoyed reading those and participating in those. So otherwise, have a great summer, and I will talk to you online soon. Take care.